And we're back. And we're back. Steve, what did we do this weekend? Let the people know.
I don't know who you're talking to. I am not to be referred to as Steve in the current juncture here. Could you please use my full title? Otherwise, I will not respond.
Galactic Emperor Steven. What did we do this last weekend?
That is so much better. Thank you. Oh, loyal subject.
I hate
Well
that. I
done.
threw up in my mouth a little
Uh,
bit.
yeah, but it's fine because I am the Galactic Emperor and you must refer to me as such henceforth.
Until the
Well, at
next
least
time.
until I lose the next game.
Until the next time.
Yeah, we played Twilight Imperium, 4th edition, with Prophecy of Kings expansion. This was my fourth time playing the game, and Justin's first, as well as the first time for the other four players we had joining us.
Including one of our OG hardcore listeners. Shout out Sam.
Oh, shout out Sam. Loves listening to us, and probably the only person that's told us that to our faces yet. So, shout out Sam Barnes. But Sam did not win this game of Twilight Imperium. You did not win this game of Twilight Imperium. I won this game of Twilight Imperium. And did I have a 3-game experience log already? Yes. But that seemed to work to my detriment for most of the game, as you guys saw me as a really big threat because of my experience in this game. And somehow I was still able to pull out a victory last second. It took a bit of luck, took a bit of fortuitous rolling, and some good timing. But that's how TI goes sometimes. And the cards happen to fall in my favor this time around. After going 0-3 in my first 3 games, I'm now 1-3, and I'm the current reigning Galactic Emperor. And it feels so good.
So, Steve, what is Twilight Imperium? Obviously, half of our listening base, Sam, will already know. But for all of our thousands of fans out there who have never heard of this, what is Twilight Imperium, and why is it such a big deal that you were able to pull out the win this time? And why are we making such a big deal out of this?
Yeah, Twilight Imperium is an amazing board game. It's not a board game. It is the board game. If somebody asked me if I had to make you remember that food pyramid that we had to learn back in elementary school, Justin?
Oh yeah, it's like a circle now or something.
I
But yeah, I remember the pyramid.
Well, yeah, who knows what the nutrition systems look like now? Everybody's eating crap anyways. So, but the analogy I'm trying to make is a board game pyramid. So, or at least like a gaming pyramid. And on the bottom you would have simple card games like War, Go Fish, Old Maid, and then as you work your way up, you have like Risk, Monopoly, and the lower end of complexity for bigger board games. As you go up, you have Root close to the top, but at the very pinnacle, at the very apex of this gaming pyramid is Twilight Imperium 4th edition. This is a game about politics, about backstabbery, about war, about making friends, about making enemies. It's just such a great experience overall, and the end goal is to be the ruler of the galaxy, to fill the void left by the crumbling Lazak's empire, and to become the new emperor of the galaxy. You play as different races as each one tries to stake their claim as the best option to rule moving forward. And fortunately, I was that race this time. I played the Argent Flight. They're an expansion race that just got introduced recently with the newest Prophecy of Kings addition to the game. There's some mean old bird boys. They got some big cannons, some really good ships that are cheap, you can fly around and annoy people with, and they were just a really strong faction to play. I had a lot of fun playing, and I would have had fun. Let me get this straight. I would have had a lot of fun regardless of whether I won or lost, but having won the game just made it all that much better. So this is the game, you may have heard of it due to its length. This game took us, nearly 12 hours of play? I mean, we took a couple breaks in the middle for food, but easily double-digit hours, and had the potential to go on longer had some fortunate luck not happen at the end. But this is a behemoth of a game and was worth every single minute. And I just have to reiterate again, winning feels amazing. To put in that much time to a game, to ponder over the board for that many hours, and to come out on top is just, it's an undescribable feeling. And I hope you experience it one day, Justin, just not against me, so that you know what I'm talking about. It's great.
Honestly, to call this a board game is doing a giant disservice to Twilight Imperium. To take the event, the experience that is spending time in this space world, in these ships and with these different alien races, to call this a board game is doing it a disservice because it is just so much beyond that. Obviously, we were doing a lot of stuff on the board. There's an actual board made of a bunch of tiles with planets and asteroids and things like that you have to maneuver about and fight people and things like that. But my experience playing this for the first time was that the board was almost secondary to kind of what made it such an incredible experience. And that was just the interaction like between the people and a lot of the table talk that went on off board, the different goals that we had to achieve and the different trades that we were making and alliances and everything like that. And I mean, it lasted 13 and a half hours, which we ended up taking about an hour and 45 minutes total of breaks in the middle for lunch and for dinner and just to walk around and stuff, because sitting down for that long is just insane. Everyone's brains were totally melted by the end, and we had to take those breaks to stay sane and to stay alive. But like, it was an all-day affair, and like you said, had the potential to go longer depending on how things shook out at the end. And so I've played a lot of board games and I own a lot of board games, and nothing comes close to the scope, to the spectacle, to the engagement that this did. It's just an experience on a whole other level. It's an event. I mean, we planned this out, which granted might have been a bit excessive, but we planned this out 6 weeks ahead of time. Make sure everyone's schedule was free to be able to come down and spend literally an entire day, 9:30 to whenever we ended, 11:30 or something like that. And it was just unbelievable. It was just unbelievable. The number of moments, the critical die roll for combat, the amount of like luck that's involved, and like hoping the luck breaks your way when you've spent 5 hours making these big plans and it all comes down to one die roll. Everyone was on their feet at the end of the game, and there was screaming and there was jumping, and this was after 12 hours of sitting, committing our brains to just like one single thing. We all should have been dead, we all should have been exhausted, and the most exciting parts were those climactic points towards the middle and towards the end. It was just it was so good, and it pains me because I was seconds away from winning, and just a couple moves there at the end gave it to you, and everyone was close. Everyone had a shot to win at the end. Yeah, it was just incredible, and we finished, and I looked down at the board and was like, let's set it up and run it again. I'm ready to spend the next 13 hours immediately in this world, and just the stories that came out of it. Again, the alliances and the conversation and the reckless attempt for victory that John, one of the guys playing, tried for at the end, that was his only shot at victory and ended up giving it to you. Just so many moments that are gonna stick in my head forever. Mistakes that I made and missed opportunities, and the agony of defeat, and the thrills of even small victories that, even if they didn't end up in a total win for the game, ended up in just victories in the moment. And it was just unbelievable. Immensely complicated, immense hurt on your brain, and even still an experience that like you look down and you look up and it's 2 hours later and you're like, where did the time go? So we finished. It was a relatively peaceful game. There's the game, some people will look at it and call it space risk because there's a lot of plastic ships on a board and you're like technically at war with each other, but we only ended up having a few actual battles during the whole game. It was mostly just this Cold War standoff, like looking at each other, daring each other to attack. It was just really tense the whole time. Like, you make an alliance, and then are you willing to trust that? And just so engaging. And even when it's not your turn, sometimes it's 40 minutes between your turns because everyone else is doing their thing, and it didn't feel like it at all. So I'm already ready for the next one. I'm already looking ahead in my schedule, and the best thing about it is that everybody felt the same way. Everybody's ready for the next one. There was no one that was stuck getting dragged along for the whole 13 hours, not having a good time. So we're gonna have to find a time and set it up and run it again, because it's not a board game. It's an experience. It's an event on the level of planning to go to Six Flags or planning to go to Disney, something like that. Planning for the next TI day. So it's I can't say enough good things about it. And you were asking me yesterday what my top 5 board games are currently, as I've built up quite a collection over the last year and a half in quarantine, and we'll probably spend some time getting into some of the other ones at some points. But you asked me what my top 5 was, and at this point, I don't think I'm able to put it in the top 5 because I don't really think it counts as a board game. Just given the scope and the ridiculousness of it, like comparing it to other games is a little bit unfair for them. And then also just the fact that it was the first play. I have no doubt that after the next one, it will be probably number 1, or at least as close to it as can get. So if you haven't played Twilight Imperium, hit up Steve and I, and we'll play it with you. Don't buy it yourself. It's incredibly expensive, and we have it and want to play it more. So the more people want to play it, we are always going to be down. So hit us up and we will come and kick your butt.
I couldn't disagree more. Please go out and buy this game. I want more people to play Twilight Imperium, as many as possible, so that this game becomes more and more mainstream and everybody that I come into contact with knows how to play. I don't want a situation where there's a single person in the world who is unfamiliar with Twilight Imperium. This should be universal.
Well, then go and buy it and then invite us to come play. So that way it achieves both.
Yes, that's a way better idea.
There we go.
Yes, that's exactly what I would suggest. Get on our level. Clearly, we've mastered the game already through 1 and 4 playthroughs, respectively, and we're ready to take on all challengers. So come get these hands.
Definitely wait for a Black Friday or Amazon Prime Day deal, something like that, because we ended up shaving off about half the cost, which is not a small amount. So, but you will not regret it, because we were talking about it. We're like, hey, we just spent an entire day, and it averaged out to about what? For one play, about $20 a person, which if you all go to Six Flags for a day, it's twice, 3 times that. So for something with repeat value that will stick around forever, absolutely 100% worth any amount that it costs. So yeah, check it out. A glowing endorsement, 5 stars out of 5. We're going to be talking about this again. Might seep more and more into these future pods, but we just wanted to give a shout out to a great experience and a great game. And I'm going to be practicing. I'm going to be doing my research. I'm going to be practicing. I'm not losing again. It's too painful to invest that much time and effort to come so short, so close. So,
yeah, well, there's always next time.
Congratulations, Steve. Well played.
Thanks. I really appreciate being on top. It's a thrilling feeling to be at the center of the galaxy for the time being until, we play again. But who knows when that will be at this point. So for a currently indefinite period of time,
it will be much sooner than between my 0th time and my first time. That's for sure. I'm hoping again at least twice before the end of the year. That's my goal. At least twice before the end of the year. You do have to plan very far ahead, so.
Yeah, we'll try to work more TI and other board game and stuff in here, as well as we have lots of subjects that we like to just chit chat about. But that was just kind of the intro to the real meat and potatoes of today's episode, which is going to be about episodes 5 and 6 of Marvel's What If series on Disney+. Last time we talked about episodes 3 and 4, which included the Avengers all being killed by a vengeful Hank Pym in episode 3, and Doctor Strange going off the deep end in episode 4, resulting in the near complete destruction of his universe, and left him with just basically a jail cell of existence all by himself.
Yeah, it was 2 super dark episodes following 2 pretty lighthearted and fun episodes, which were the first 2, Captain Carter and T'Challa Star-Lord, were pretty light and fun, had a lot of funny moments, a lot of good action. The good guys just totally dominated both of them. And then it was followed by 2 super dark ones. I mean, the good guys kind of won in 3. They captured Hank Pym, but all the Avengers got killed, and then Loki ended up taking over the planet. So it ended up super dark. And then obviously the one where Doctor Strange ended the universe is as dark as it could possibly get. So I really had no idea what to expect heading into 5. Obviously the promos were all for the zombies, and that ended up getting spoiled for me, unfortunately, which is why I don't watch the promos. People keep talking to me about it. And if you're one of those people that talks to me about what happens, please stop. um, but yeah, I really didn't really know what to expect heading into it. If it was going to be, they overcame the zombies or the zombies ended up just taking over everything. Because the tone of the first four has been kind of all over the place, which left me really intrigued heading into watching them because it showed that Disney and whoever the showrunner is for What If is, I mean, it's a different person writing and editing or directing each episode. They have the willingness to kind of just go off the rails of what the typical MCU formula would be. Yeah, so I was very excited heading into these. Very excited heading into these last two episodes. And yeah, Steve, what were your thoughts on the zombie one?
The zombie episode was pretty crazy. I do agree with you about the tone of the show, that it's kind of been all over the place, but I feel like it's been getting progressively darker. Doctor Strange to me was the darkest episode of the show, and I don't think the zombie episode somehow, despite almost all of our favorite heroes becoming brainless zombies, didn't seem to be as dark as the prior episode. There were still not lots of, there were still several heroes still as their old selves when this episode happens. And it seems like there was a tiny bit of hope at the end, although that was quickly snuffed out by the immediately following scene that actually ended the episode. So, the like you, I saw that the zombie episode was going to be part of the season. I didn't know it was going to be week 5. To me, that seems like a concept that you could save for the finale of the show. Zombie Avengers is like pretty big concept, and I feel like that could have been easily finale material and leave people wanting more going into the second season of What If. But I gotta say, based on my theory about how this season and this series overall is going to go, I can definitely see it fitting here in the middle. The thing that surprised me the most about this episode was actually when it takes place, or when it might have taken place. Or I guess it did take place, because these are actual universes that the Watcher is observing. So I was not expecting this to take place during Infinity War. And I mean, this episode starts off with Bruce Banner getting shot back into the Sanctum the same exact way he did in the beginning of Infinity War, except this time there's no Doctor Strange or Wong there to greet him. Banner ends up being kind of ambushed, isn't really the right word, because it doesn't seem like they're after him specifically, but he comes across Iron Man, Wong, and Doctor Strange already turned into zombies. He sees them in the shadows and he's like, "Hey guys," and they take down some creature off screen, and he's like, "Oh, way to go!" And then they start like eating it, and he's like, "Oh, that's it's a little overboard, guys, don't you think?" And that's when the lighting changes and it's revealed that they're zombies already, which obviously insanely freaky to see the heroes that we know and love as zombie versions of themselves. But one thing I thought was really cool here was that it appears that the zombie versions of our heroes can still retain the abilities of that hero. Like zombie Iron Man was still in the suit and flying and using the arc reactor technology. Zombie Wong and Strange were still able to use the mystic arts to some degree. So it seems like the zombies are not entirely brainless, but they keep some, at least the knowledge of their prior form intact to be able to use their, weaponry and abilities to some degree. But fortunately, Bruce Banner is saved by Hope Van Dyne and her swarm of ants. They save the day by just eating all the flesh off these zombies, which was super creepy. And I can't believe that they put that in. Well, I guess we can officially stop calling this a kid's show. Like, I can't believe they put that in like a PG-13 show. Like this just swarm of ants devouring zombie flesh off faces, turning them to skeletons right in front of us. Like that was, I mean, I thought that was something they might have done off screen and just showed us the skeleton at the end. And even that would have been pretty creepy. But they showed us like the ants swarming over these characters and just devouring them. It was pretty creepy to watch. But she saves Bruce, as well as Peter Parker shows up and saves him as well. There's a small crew of living heroes still alive and are scooping up Bruce to kind of help their cause as they try to find a cure for this zombie virus. Apparently this came into the world as a result of the actions in Ant-Man and the Wasp, where the main characters go into the quantum realm to save Janet Van Dyne, But in this universe, she had contracted a quantum virus, which I guess answers Scott's question from one of the movies where he says, "You guys just put quantum in front of everything," which, yes, apparently they do. I have no problem with that. If they want to just say quantum for almost any reason, there's no scientific explanation that would actually make it make sense. So if you want to chalk it up to quantum nonsense, like I have zero qualms about that. It's what if is the closest we've had to like an actual living like comic book, I would say, with the animation and storylines that they've taken so far here. And comics just don't make sense if you think about them too hard. So I'm not just giving this a free pass for, bad writing if they just say quantum stuff, but there is a degree of suspension of disbelief that you have to have when, reading comics and now watching comics unfold. So I didn't really care that they use the same terminology for almost everything. But yeah, this is now the second episode where Hank Pym is responsible for like the end of the world. Although this one is, not his fault. It's a little bit more of an accident. But yeah, the Pyms and the Van Dynes unleash zombie hell on Earth. And apparently the Avengers just had like the world's dumbest plan. Like we see a cutscene of them landing from a Quinjet trying to take on a zombie horde. And, most of our heroes get taken into the zombie army, I guess is what you want to say. They become zombified. And like I can't understand that plan. Like where's the logic in trying to send like 6, albeit, stronger heroes to go fight zombies hand to hand? Like only bad things can happen there. It doesn't make sense to me. That was just a super bad plan.
That's where Tony Stark, being a genius, has to just hole up and make an antidote. Because he clearly would be able to, because he's a genius. He can make anything, right? So, like, why go and fight them? Like, would their first response not be, hey, let's cure these people? Like, obviously there's a ticking time bomb, because the zombies are going to keep rampaging while that's going on. But also, Iron Man has, like, his drones and everything. I don't know if he technically has made Edith at this point. I guess not. But he would have some, like, drone army or some, like, ability to affect without him physically going out there and exposing himself, or just fly above the zombies and shoot them from the sky. Like, anyone who's hand to hand.
That was another thing that made zero sense to me. Like, Iron Man is in the Iron Man suit. How did the zombies bite him? Like, how does that? You're telling me that the bleeding edge armor was able to get overcome by just zombies? Like, that thing made Thanos bleed, and like, did he take his face mask off on purpose to let them in? Like, that didn't make sense to me. I also feel like Wong and Doctor Strange would be way better at stopping zombies. Like, why couldn't they just make like a little portal and then shoot them off like into space? Like, I don't know how they must have gotten caught off guard. But we see Iron Man landing with the other Avengers like fighting hand to hand. So like that's when he must have gotten turned, and it didn't make sense. But clearly everybody turned their brains off for that idea.
Yeah, because he's dumb.
That was just horrific from the jump. So,
I mean, the funniest thing to me thinking about that was like Black Widow going up and doing her, legs around the head like flip thing to a zombie, and then just getting bit. It's like, bro, what is wrong with you? Like, oh my, even like Cap, dude. If your main thing is hand-to-hand, just don't do it. Like, this is something that actually I've had a thought of the last couple of days, right? This is a bit of a tangent, but I had been thinking that I've actually had a couple of contradictory thoughts about the MCU, and I'm willing to come clean about them, right? Specifically with the Battle of Wakanda, we'll say, in the regular Infinity War, right? One of my big issues was that Bucky, the White Wolf, or I don't know if he's technically at that point called the Winter Soldier or the White Wolf, but he is a super soldier, and he, in that battle, gets relegated to, like, standing there and shooting, right? Which, like, for me is an underuse of the character, a bit lame, given his abilities and his strength and everything. But then I also have complained, why the heck do the Wakandans not just stand and shoot the whole time? Why do they go and fight hand-to-hand? And I had this realization the other day where I was like, wait a second, Captain America should be shooting a machine gun too. Like, Bucky's body count is way higher, for sure. Even with the super soldier serum, it's not going to be better than like an M16. And so I had this realization. I'm like, Black Widow should have one. I mean, Hawkeye should have one. That would just make way more sense. And so, this whole time I was like, why are they underutilizing Bucky? Which I still think as a character they've underutilized him. But then I'm like, wait, why does like Steve Rogers not just have a machine gun in this battle too? Like makes way more sense. And so specifically here against the zombies, like why would you go in and fight hand to hand? Like even if you're a super soldier, even if you're the Hulk, something is gonna scratch you or bite you at some point. Just stay back, shoot.
Right. Like why even risk it? Like just give everybody just a big ass gun and then go to town. Like you just set up turrets. And this is this is a complete tangent here, but one of my favorite guilty pleasure movies is Pacific Rim. It is written so poorly and the dialogue is terrible and nothing makes sense, but you get to see giant robots fighting giant aliens. But my issue with that movie, right, is they know where the kaiju are coming from in the Pacific Ocean. Why do they make giant robots that like fight them one on one that have like big guns on them? Why wouldn't you just make like a bunch of turrets and aim them at the breach where you know they're coming from? Hello, this is just the obvious solution. Clearly, it wouldn't have made for a more entertaining movie, but this is the logical step that would have been taken. Like, there's no reason to have coastal cities each protected by their own Jaeger when you could just save way more money and be way more efficient by just putting a ton of those laser cannons pointed right at the breach. But they have to go have cool hand-to-hand combat, I guess. So, logic is thrown out the window. But yeah, maybe Bucky is actually the smartest Avenger, dude. He's just posted up with a big gun and he's just putting in work. Him and War Machine and Falcon probably had the biggest body counts out of the anybody in Infinity War at the Battle of Wakanda, because they just had insane munitions available to them. So
yeah, absolutely, dude. Yo, we gotta write our own action movie script. It would be boring and over in 10 minutes, but we could definitely write a more logical one at least.
Yeah, where all the characters are just smart and make the right decisions. Yeah, the movie would be over immediately.
Exactly. Yo, like a horror movie. Like, let's not go in that abandoned barn. How about that? We'll just stay out where it's well lit near the police station, and we'll be good to go.
Yeah, it's like
over
that.
in 10 minutes.
What is that commercial?
It's Geico, right?
What is it? It's like Snickers or Geico. It's like, oh, you make bad decisions. Oh, it's like when you're in a horror movie, you make bad decisions. It's what you do. Yeah, it is Geico. And they're like, why can't we just get in that running car? He's like, are you crazy? Let's hide behind those rusty chainsaws. There's like complete stupid, illogical moves that if they didn't happen, the movie wouldn't happen. So I guess it makes sense like for the plot. But again, like just beyond stupid plan by the Avengers here. And the result is that basically everybody in the world, there might be some holdouts here and there across the planet, but we never see any of them aside from the pocket of main characters that are left. So they're on their way to try to find a cure for this zombie virus, and they're tracking a signal coming from Camp Lehigh, which is where Captain America takes place for a lot of the movie, as well as that's the place where they go back in Winter Soldier to find Zola's kind of computer essence living there. And finally, they go back again in Endgame when Steve and Tony travel back through time to grab the Tesseract and Pym particles. Now, what they find there, unfortunately, is not a cure, but they find Vision doing experiments with his Mind Stone. And they find alive versions of Ant-Man and T'Challa. And I say versions because Ant-Man is actually just a head. So he's like a Futurama head in a jar that is just cracking jokes the whole time, which I loved Paul Rudd just doing whatever he wanted this episode. But we find T'Challa is there with like one leg. And what our heroes find out is that Vision, sort of in the inverse situation from WandaVision, which we just saw, Vision could not bear to lose Wanda in this universe. Now, she's been zombified, but what he's doing, because he's not, flesh and he's not a threat to them,
he can't get zombified either.
Correct. So he's been luring people to Camp Lehigh to basically feed Scarlet Witch and keep her, I guess, alive in her zombie form, which was just so creepy. That was like, I did not expect to see a reverse of WandaVision like so soon after the show had already come out. But this was just like terrifying.
Well, and he's able to justify it because Vision is supposed to be like the completely logical computer brain, right? And he's able to justify it because he says, well, she is not out turning anyone else into zombies if I keep her here and satisfied, right? which obviously it's getting clouded by, he has a capacity for emotions more than what he's technically supposed to, just being ones and zeros. And so obviously he still is in love with her and is hoping that there'll be some way to fix it, or at least he can't bear to kill her, which would be the logical solution to prevent her from hurting anybody else, would be just to kill her, right? But he can't bear to leave, and he can't bear to kill her, which is fascinating because she, in the actual Infinity War, she has that really difficult choice where she has to kill him to prevent greater harm by letting Thanos get the Mind Stone, which obviously ends up not working, but she has to deal with that. And here we see a reversal where, in order to prevent harm to the public good, he has an opportunity to kill her, and he decides not to, but rather to keep luring people in and feeding them bit by bit. So we presume, and we can get a sense that that's what happened with Scott. It's never officially says that, but given that he's just a head left, either Ant-Man had been a zombie and had decomposed and Vision was able to cure him, or the whole rest of his body had already been fed to Scarlet Witch, and we're not explicitly told which. But then we see T'Challa is missing, parts of some of his limbs, and he clearly is just being fed bit by bit, which is like, yeah, super gross and super, super dark. Like, it's crazy, how adult these have gotten so quickly. All of our heroes that show up, which a few of them got zombified on the way, and we saw a couple of other no longer friendly faces. Like we had a Bucky versus Steve, human Bucky versus zombie Steve face off, and a couple other moments like that. But the ones that survive and make it to the camp are like, first they're happy to see Vision, and then they're like, hold up, what the heck is going on here? And they're like,
hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right.
And so they're like, well, clearly the antidote is not here, but like Vision seems to know where it is, or that there is one still. And they're like, dude, like there has to be a better way than you keeping people prisoner and feeding them bit by bit to Wanda. And they have a bit of a back and forth there, where Vision realizes, he's like, oh wait, you're totally right. But I also can't be the one to kill Wanda. So instead what he does is he rips out the Mind Stone by himself, and he kills himself rather than killing her. And our heroes, get it. And the Mind Stone has been keeping the zombies away from the compound, away from Camp Lehigh. So the Mind Stone clatters to the ground and Vision's dead, and they're like, oh shoot, well we gotta take this and run, because now Scarlet Witch is coming after us. And they start running away as the zombies all start closing in, and she like blows off the roof and everything. And it's like a pretty crazy scene. It had me really itching to see what was going to happen next. It seemed like a really good like first act and a half of like a movie, or like a full-length running TV show.
Yeah, I was fully expecting way more out of this episode, because as Vision, plucks a stone out of his own head, which haunting. I mean, he was screaming as he does it, and just the same imagery of Thanos plucking the stone out like it was nothing flashes through your mind. It's just crazy to see how many times Vision has died in the MCU now. And I always think, oh, poor Vision, he's died the most. And initially, we've seen him die just plenty of times at this point. As Jarvis in Age of Ultron, we thought Ultron killed him. Then he comes back as Vision, and now Vision's been killed multiple times on screen. I always got to remember that Doctor Strange still has the highest death count at the end of his own movie. Where it's assumed that he died to Dormammu like thousands, if not millions of times before Dormammu got like aggravated. It doesn't necessarily show them all the same emotional degree that Vision's deaths do. But yeah, Vision's bit the dust, a number of times, and each one doesn't hurt any less than the last. But his last act is to essentially give our remaining heroes, which at this point is Peter Parker, what's left of T'Challa, Scott Lang's head, and the Cloak of Levitation. That's pretty much everybody that's left. Everybody else died or, was zombified along the way. And their only recourse at this point is to go to Wakanda, which, because of its vibranium shield around the country, or at least the capital city, is kind of the last bastion of human life on the planet. And We see them flying into Wakanda with a little bit of hope that, they might be able to find the cure with the Mind Stone and save the world. And the episode seemed to be ending on, a fairly positive note, as things play out somewhat predictably from there. Until the final shot where it brings back around the fact that this is happening during Infinity War. And we see a shot of zombie Thanos with 5 stones in his Infinity Gauntlet, which is just like the most ridiculous frame to end an episode on. Like, how is that the finale of the episode? I wasn't paying attention. I was so drawn into the episode that I was not paying attention at all to how long it had been, and it was mind blown that it had already been 30 whatever minutes into the episode and it was over already. I even more than last week or prior weeks where there seems to be another threat. I think actually not necessarily last week, but episode 2 where Thanos is no longer a threat after T'Challa changes his mind out in space. But we see Ego and Quill linking up, and this is a much different Quill that would likely be coerced by his dad and lead to Ego destroying the universe. And so both these episodes, I'm wanting to see the conclusion to the story, and they're just completely yanking the rug out from under us at the end. And this is where I'll talk about my theory for the show here before we get into episode 6. But clearly, all these are connected as a watcher, as is observing them and narrating everything as it goes along. And these are, it's animated, but these are real universes that he's observing. They're just being, shown to us in an animated format. So these things are happening / have happened in universes across the multiverse. And the Watcher being the one constant throughout. Obviously, he was basically a narration device for the first 3 episodes. And then episode 4, he has the interaction with Strange as his universe is collapsing. Mm-hmm. So first actual dialogue with another character, as well as each episode he's been getting more and more clear in the background. He kind of started off as just a vague shadow looming over the events that you'd see once or twice an episode. And now he's visible clearly on the horizon, like looming large, a nearly opaque figure that, you wouldn't be at all surprised if somebody was just in the foreground and just turned around and was like, hey, what's that guy doing there? Like, he's so obvious that he's observing and is present for all these events. And my theory is that these universes that have had terrible things happen to them, he's watching these things happen and he's like, listen, these can't continue to go on. And he's mentioned multiple times that he's not able to interfere or won't interfere for whatever reason. I think he's going to break that rule at some point. He's going to interfere. He's going to affect events one way or the other. And I would love to see him kind of sew up all these stories. If he has to do essentially what happened in Doctor Strange's universe in episode 4 and like compress it until everybody is destroyed. Like, if that's the only way to save the entire universe from this zombie outbreak on Earth, plus zombie Thanos about to snap away, half of existence as is. I mean, there's got to be some conclusion to that story. I can't believe that they would just write, 9 halves of stories and then leave them all unanswered. It's possible that they would return to them in season 2, but I'd really love to see a complete season here, which involves the Watcher stepping in and stopping these events from being permanent, or at least has some sort of conclusion to these. Because, I mean, this episode, and, we'll get to the finale of 6 as well, but especially like 2 and 5 here have been very open-ended as to what might happen and leave us with intriguing questions that have not been answered in the slightest so far. So I would love to see that happen. I have zero basis for thinking that would be the case other than the evidence that I've laid out, but I would really like to see that happen. These are very entertaining, just one-offs, but I would like to see them come together into something a little bit more meaningful. And I think that seems like a very Marvel thing to do. So we'll see what happens, but that's my theory.
I hadn't noticed until this episode that all the episodes leave off in a kind of an unsatisfactory way, or at least in a very open-ended way. Maybe not unsatisfactory, but the first episode ends with Captain Carter in the real world, present time, open-ended, boom, what happens next? The second one ends, like you said, with Ego popping in at the Dairy Queen or whatever it was, open-ended. The third one, Loki takes over, open-ended. Number 4 was the only one that really hasn't ended that way because the universe collapsed in on itself and that was the end, right? So that one was really the only one.
Right. So that's the only
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
That's the only one that's felt relatively sewn up to me. The only difference is now that there's just some tiny universe where a supremely powerful Doctor Strange is just like hanging out, drowning in his own grief.
yeah. But I hadn't noticed that they ended that way. Like I hadn't finished off any of them thinking, wait, why is there not more? Until this episode. This one just seemed to end so like stark in the middle, kind of out of nowhere. Like the other three had conclusions and then a slight like epilogue, basically, right? Like Captain Carter sacrificed herself, pushed the tentacle monster in, finale, conclusion, and then the last little minute. The second one ended where, they beat the Collector and saved everyone, and then T'Challa went home, boom, conclusion, and then a little bit at the end. The third one, they capture Hank Pym, boom, conclusion, and then Loki at the end, right? And then this one was the only one that there wasn't really like even a conclusion. It's like, okay, we got the stone and now we're off to do the third act to go and get a cure at Wakanda. And then it just ends out of nowhere with the Thanos thing. And so, one thing that we had been talking about as a complaint of the show, if complaint's the right word, is just how like fast they've had to move through the story in each week since they're only 30 minutes. And this was one that like really jumped out to me as that being the case. It felt like a pretty incomplete story, which they all have been to a degree or so. And so I really am hoping that this ends up being something that all ties together a bit more, because I think on a rewatch it will be much better. And I really like this episode still. I thought Zombies was really cool. Marvel Zombies was a comic series that I read in middle school. It was in the middle school library, and I read that thing like all the way through because it had a couple graphic novels with it and a few comics, and it just happened to be in the comic section, and I read it, and it was like one of my favorite comics, and it was really cool seeing it on screen. The type of thing that I almost wish was like a whole movie or even a couple movies, but very happy to see it here. But it did really come out of nowhere, the ending, and so it does make me hope that it all wraps together some point in this season, or at the very least gets continued, like maybe in season 2 if each episode gets mirrored, although I suspect that would not be the case. I would suspect that they would do more what ifs based on the stuff that comes out between now and then, as a lot more content's going to be put into the MCU. So I think it was a fun like twist ending, but it wasn't even really an ending. It was just like they had another scene and then just cut it off in the middle of the story. Like we don't even see them reach Wakanda. Obviously they probably do, but I don't know. It seemed like it could have used an extra 10 minutes, which we've said about all of them, but I think this was the most severe example of that. And so it left me off with a bit of mixed feelings, even though I enjoyed it all the way through. Just the way it ended so suddenly, I was like, what? Wait, what? And so I hope you're right, and I hope that the watcher does connect it all somehow, because he really has like been showing up more and more and has more presence in each episode. I mean, even if he doesn't technically interact with anyone other than the Doctor Strange one. But yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see, and I still suspect, given just that it's the MCU, that it will tie in together. I don't know if they'll be able to resist, but we've made a couple of horribly wrong predictions about this so far. It being a kid show, and then also this was the first week that we had a repeat character. We had a few of them actually, and this was the first time that a character showed up again, which was something that we had talked about, or I had brought up last week. And then in the next episode, we see another returning character. So as we move into talking about episode 6, T'Challa sets the record with being in 3 out of the 6 episodes, when no other character is in more than 2. So shout out to him.
Well, aside from the Watcher himself,
well,
but
the Watcher
that
doesn't
seems
count.
like cheating.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, we can get right into the episode here. So this episode is what if Killmonger saved Tony Stark, and this one goes all the way back to Iron Man 1. And the Nexus event here, I guess we don't really know the true Nexus event, as it could have happened years before to lead to this scenario. But as Tony Stark's SUV convoy in Afghanistan is attacked by terrorists, before he's captured, he's saved by Killmonger, who, as part of his Navy SEAL undercover operations, had been infiltrating the Ten Rings and uncovered the plot to capture him and use him to arm, the Ten Rings with Jericho missiles and all kinds of weaponry. So he saves Tony from that fate, and as a result, there's nothing that pierces Tony's heart, and he doesn't have to build, the arc reactor in the cave, and he doesn't have to build the Iron Man suit ever. And also, one of the big things I think is his character actually changes because he never learns his lesson that, like, maybe funding war is bad and creating weapons for people to destroy each other with is bad. Because he comes back from, his trip and he's like, listen, I saw people using our weapons to, destroy American soldiers, and, our solution has to be to just be bigger and better than they are. So he kind of doubles down on his, original ideology instead of flipping it entirely, which clearly leads to, a different universe, with no Iron Man. Obviously, the entire sequence of events that follows is completely different. But by saving him, Killmonger kind of earns Tony's trust. As they become friends, I guess you could say, or, at least, buddies, they bond over their father issues, as well as, he keeps promoting Killmonger within his organization. He starts off as like a head of security. There's a funny quip from Happy where he's like, oh, that was supposed to be my promotion. As well as Killmonger, reveals Obadiah Stane's involvement in the plot to, kidnap or kill Tony, which, he brings receipts. He brings, video and digital evidence. So it's undeniable for Stane. But that, just endears him to Tony further. And he actually gives Killmonger Stane's old position as like COO, I think.
Yeah, which is funny because like Killmonger has no like business experience or anything like that. It's kind of funny how he does that, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, he even says that. He says, I'm not much of a business guy. He's like, I'm more of a warrior. And Tony's like, maybe that's exactly who we need like in this position. And I'm like, it seems like a bad idea, but
he always has been an impulsive person, so not unbelievable.
They end up working together on an idea that Killmonger pitches Tony of, his, like you mentioned previously, like his drone army. So kind of taking stuff from, Black Panther and Iron Man, and even Iron Man 2, where Whiplash creates the drone army. Killmonger convinces Tony that this is the way to move forward with weapons technology and warfare in general. There's a great line in here where Tony says that the schematics that Killmonger had drawn up kind of look like a Gundam. And, Killmonger is like, hey, what? I like anime. Which I thought was a really great nod to Michael B. Jordan, who returns to voice himself, or to voice, Killmonger in this episode. He's notoriously a big anime fan, as well as it's hard to catch in live action because, it's so different from animation sometimes, but Killmonger's outfit in Black Panther, the blue armor with the yellow chest plating is clearly modeled off Vegeta from Dragon Ball. And I don't know how I couldn't pick that up, obviously, with the live action, because in retrospect, it's like, oh, forehead slap, Hadoi, they look exactly the same. But it stood out to me even more in the animated version that we see here. I was like, that could easily just be Vegeta. And they even have like similar, ideologies as, royalty, and the way that they think about carrying out their duties and the privilege that they have, as well as like the right that they believe that they have to carry out, the war in whatever way they see fit. So I thought that line was great. But we also see Killmonger betray Tony and kill him with a vibranium spear later on. So all this that Killmonger is doing is obviously to set up a backstab, because Tony's character might have changed, but Killmonger is still a skeevy, conniving, backstabber at heart.
And before we see him kill Tony, he tells Tony, hey, like our tech isn't working and it doesn't seem to be working, and he's like, we need vibranium for it. And so Tony sends him on this mission to do an arms deal with Ulysses Claw, who we know that Killmonger has already been in contact with, and they send Rhodey instead to be like the liaison, and Killmonger essentially uses Tony's money to buy like all sorts of vibranium to help build these robots, but Black Panther shows up and tries to disrupt the trade because, Claw was the one who had stolen all that vibranium, and so he was a vigilante, or not a vigilante, but he was like a criminal on the run from Wakanda. And so Black Panther shows up to disrupt it, and in that skirmish, Killmonger ends up killing both Rhodey and T'Challa. And so poor T'Challa ends up, biting the dust, and Killmonger goes back and claims that it just went bad, and then ends up killing Tony once Tony starts getting suspicious. And so we see that he like keeps killing people, and then somehow no one like looks at like, okay, who's the only person that survived all of these encounters, like that has been there and just showed up in the last couple months as well. We see Thunderbolt Ross is like, as soon as Tony Stark ends up being dead, we see that Thunderbolt Ross, the general, he just claims the right to, like, the wartime right to tell Stark Industries that they have to make new weapons for the military, and that they have to produce all of the drones, because Pepper is super suspicious. She's like, I don't trust this, no way. And he's like, well, Tony was killed with a Wakandan spear, so we're going to war with Wakanda. Which at this point they still think Wakanda is like this third world country, so they're getting all decked out to go and fight what they think is like a super primitive, population, which is kind of funny to me. But he ends up saying like, we're basically wartime commandeering this company, and we're gonna put into production all of these drones that Killmonger wanted to be made. And so he's kind of just getting what he wants, and you just look around and you're like, Pepper is suspicious, but everyone else is just going along with it. You're like, guys, come on, like, clearly something's up here. But they go along with it, and he ends up showing up in Wakanda a bit ahead of time, before the U.S. drone army ends up showing up, and he kills Claw on the way and brings him in just like he did in Black Panther, saying, hey, this is my sign to you that I am loyal to Wakanda. This is my sign that I'm loyal to Wakanda. I killed this traitor, or this thief who stole all this vibranium from you that you've been wanting to kill or capture for a while. So here's this. Plus, the U.S. Army is coming, and I know how to stop these drones. You just have to let them in, and then shut the shield, and then all of their radio waves or whatever it is that connects them to the controller will like shut down, and they won't be able to function. So the Wakandans accept him, say, oh wow, thank you, you've come home, and kind of adopt him. The King T'Chaka kind of adopts him as a second son, not knowing that he was the one that killed T'Challa. And they think it was the Americans, and the Americans think that Tony Stark was killed by the Wakandans, which is kind of interesting to me, why Tony Stark being killed like would lead to a war. It's not like he was the president or like an official. Like, obviously he's a big deal, but like one person getting killed, even someone as big as Tony Stark, wouldn't lead to an international war. But regardless.
Right. Well, so the reason that it gets escalated as such is because Killmonger kills him with a vibranium spear, which is then blamed on the Dora Milaje, who famously use, well, I guess they're not famous because
they know it's from
nobody
Wakanda,
knows anything
though.
about Wakanda,
Yeah.
but the Dora Milaje, use, the vibranium spears. So, Killmonger blames it on them. But yeah, I mean, again, it's like you said.
It still wouldn't lead to a war. It wasn't like it was a U.S. like politician or like the president or something. It was a person.
Right. It clearly, gets escalated very fast for the sake of the episode's runtime here. But yeah, I mean, it goes into what you said. Like, all these people die around Killmonger as he shows up mysteriously with seemingly a heart of gold, and then all these people around him die under mysterious circumstances, and he makes it out every time. Seems like there'd be more than a couple people that would pick up on the shadiness that's going on, but by the end of the episode, only Shuri and Pepper Potts are even concerned about his scheming. Everybody else seems to be totally taken by him and on his side. But yeah, I mean, the episode ends with Killmonger having become, the new Black Panther, anointed by T'Chaka. And I mean, they have a big battle with the drones inside Wakanda. Killmonger ends up, fighting on the Wakandan side, so he endears himself to them even more for helping defend the nation that he only just came into recently. And so, he seems to be playing like 8-dimensional chess here, which, is crazy. But the episode ends with the U.S. preparing for like a full-scale invasion of Wakanda, which, I mean, it seems like they would lose that just because, I mean, vibranium seems to trump everything. But, I mean, the U.S. military is no joke. And with Ross at the helm, there's probably going to be no quarter given. So, this episode, another one that ends with seemingly no resolution, as the final shot is like Shuri and Pepper talking about what they can do to expose Killmonger to the world and show his treachery. But like we don't see the war, we don't see anything that comes as a result of that. And so Killmonger like rising to like Black Panther rank and being at the center of what's sure to be like the biggest war the earth has ever seen, between two nations. Seems just again like an incomplete story. And I would love to see this get wrapped up in some way by the watcher. Even if the finale is just 8 5-minute bits, or I guess that would be 40 minutes. So 8 like 3.5-minute bits where he just goes around and like fixes every single episode that came before. Like I want to see conclusions to this. That would probably be a terrible episode now that I say it out loud. But like I want to see the stories that are being told here, be concluded. Even if they're in a non-satisfactory way or like the good guys lose. Like if the prior episode ended with just, zombie Thanos beating them to Wakanda, getting the Mind Stone and snapping half of the universe either out of existence, or if zombie Thanos has different machinations in mind. Like just seeing what would come as a result of the story. I don't want to say let down because I'm very intrigued by these, but I'm feeling led on by them not concluding. And it seems very un-Marvel like to do that to the audience. And I would love to see conclusions here.
Yeah, those are the type of things. The open-endedness is something that happens when they have a sequel coming, or when they have a plotline that will be continued in another story, right? And we don't know for sure that will be the case. I think to clarify what you were saying, the lack of an ending, lack of a conclusion, is not because it seems like the bad guys are winning, right? That is not why like there's an issue here. If the bad guys win, great. It's fresh, it's unique. If there's a conclusion and the bad guys win, I'm all for it. And I think you would all be all for it as well, not to put words in your mouth. But I think it's not the fact that in the last couple episodes, the darkness seems to be winning. Although that has been the trend over essentially all of the episodes so far, minus the first one and kind of the second and third. That's not the issue. We love the end of Infinity War, and honestly, I think it would have been pretty sick if they just ended the MCU after Infinity War. But it's about the fact that they're just like stopping in the middle of scenes that seem like they're leading on to more. And so I agree. I hope that they are able to come back to these and wrap them up or connect them all in a way that ends them all together or something like that. Because I think it's interesting that they're leaving it up seemingly to our imagination how these things end. Like obviously if they're sticking with a half hour, they're not going to be able to bring a satisfying conclusion without rushing even more. But the fact that they're kind of, especially these last two, leave on, it seems like in the middle of a scene, essentially, that's like, man, I really hope that they come back and are able to wrap it up nicely. And whether that's the Watcher stepping in or something else, who knows? But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. It definitely is leaving me intrigued for the next ones, although, yeah, I do think this is potentially the least interested I've been heading into the last third of a season compared with the other 3 MCU Disney Plus shows as of this point. I think the fact that there's not one, as far as we're aware, like continuous narrative that's building to something. While I've enjoyed every episode individually, I think it doesn't give the same pull to like I have to watch the next episode that the last 3 shows did, which maybe that's not the intent of it. It's supposed to be lighter in the sense of like a continuous like in-depth story, not lighter in terms of mood. Maybe that's the case, but that's kind of just where I'm at right now with regards to this show. So I've enjoyed and I will enjoy, I'm pretty sure, every episode, but it's not giving me that same pull like, oh, I can't wait to see how this season ends that the last few have had.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I agree that it's not necessarily I can't wait to see what happens next. It's more of a let's wait and see what happens next. Because, it's totally possible, if my theory is correct, that this is going to be building to one, narrative where everything comes together in the end. But with this show, we are still waiting to see if this is going to have any sort of impact on the main MCU storyline, being, the live action plot that we've been following for 10 years at this point. If that gets revealed, I think that makes the show 50 times better if everything is connected at the end. And again, I don't see how these like can't be. With the Watcher in the background for every episode and having interacted with the main character already, I strongly feel that that will be coming in the next couple weeks. But with no guarantee of that, and then even if it does tie in together, with no guarantee that that will have any impact on the rest of the universe going forward, or I guess, at this point, the rest of the multiverse going forward, it's hard to get as invested for this as the prior shows, even if, again, this show has been like technically incredible. The animation, voice acting, everything has been stellar. It's just that if it doesn't connect, it's just more of like a nice side dish or like even appetizer compared to the main course of, the main plot that we have. Again, we'll wait and see what happens. I don't want it to sound like I'm disappointed in the show because I'm really like, this is exactly what I was expecting. Like I said to myself before the show started, even if this is just 9 episodes that are all separate and just tell interesting stories on their own and don't connect or affect anything else, like I'm still going to enjoy it most likely because of, Marvel's storytelling ability and the animation and, just quality that they're going to bring to the show. But I will enjoy it, like I said, 50 times more if this does tie in together. This whole first season is one story that's, being told separately but comes together. And if it, has some impact on the overall universe, that'd be incredible. But again, we'll wait and see. We'll see with episode 7 coming out, just in a couple of days here at the time of recording. We will see what that has in store. Maybe it will give indications to where the season's headed, but we do have to remember that there is a season 2 of this already greenlit and, probably already being worked on. So, similar to how Loki ended with a very open-ended finale, I could see a similar thing happening with What If, where, maybe they tie it in together, but don't conclude the whole story so that there's more room for storytelling down the line. But we will have to wait just alongside the rest of you guys and figure it out together.
Steve, hear me out for a second. I want to be clear. This is not a prediction. This is not going to happen. I can virtually guarantee this. But as a thought experiment, right? Black Panther 2 is coming out at some point down the line. I don't know if we've gotten a date for it or a year even, but it's coming out at some point down the line. And of course, with the tragic and unfortunate passing of Chadwick Boseman, T'Challa, and they've already announced T'Challa will not be recast, right? So they're going to have something else fill in, someone else fill in, likely an existing character fill in as Black Panther, right? Imagine a scenario where Black Panther 2 is in a separate universe, and rather than picking up after Endgame or whatever, it picks up at the end of this episode. So they bring back Michael B. Jordan, Killmonger, as the Black Panther, with T'Chaka still alive, in Wakanda, with Shuri and Pepper working against him, and the U.S. Army about to come attack Wakanda. That does a couple things, right? It brings back Michael B. Jordan, which I think every single person who watched Black Panther thought he was one of the best parts of the movie. Everybody loved him. A lot of people have wanted Killmonger to come back in some capacity. And it solves the issue of Chadwick Boseman not being able to act as T'Challa, right? Because T'Challa already died in this universe. And it cements What If as being canon, even though we've been told that it is. It is a firm tie-in, and with the multiverse about to expand, it totally could fit in. I don't think this is going to happen. I think they're going to still continue to focus on the main timeline that we've been following up to this point. But that could be a way that they could work around it, Because now they still have Killmonger as the Black Panther, and then instead of having a potentially awkward, having to CG Chadwick Boseman in, or have to come up with some reason as to why he is passing on the Black Panther mantle, or for some reason as to, if he passes away off screen or something, instead of having to navigate that bridge, if they just pick it up right after this episode, which is canon anyway, right? And then just carry on and it just flows completely naturally. That, I don't think is that bad of an idea. Again, I don't think it's going to happen. It's not a prediction. I would bet lots of money that that's not what's going to happen. But it would solve a lot of issues with Black Panther 2. And it would do something really cool in tying What If directly into the MCU.
I don't think that's a good idea. But I also agree with you that I don't think it's that bad of an idea. I don't know how they can tell like a main story, especially a sequel for one of the most beloved movies in the MCU, and have it be a separate timeline. I mean, I guess we don't know how the multiverse is going to shake out by the time Black Panther 2 comes out, but I can't see them just doing an alternate timeline where it may not have an effect on the rest of the MCU going forward, especially if they're just going to leave, the characters from the main timeline that we know, like Shuri and Ramonda and Okoye and Nakia. They're just going to leave them in the lurch completely as they tell a story from a different timeline. So we'll see.
I mean, they could easily show up. Maybe what Shuri does is she this alternate timeline. Shuri is smart enough to open a branch in the timeline to bring in main timeline MCU heroes to come and help. And maybe she brings in her other version of Shuri to help fight, something like that. I don't know. Again, it's not a prediction, and I totally agree with you that it would kind of drop the ball just randomly on all these other characters. But if the multiverse shakes out and we end up seeing multiple versions of every hero, or at least most heroes anyway, which we know is going to happen with Spider-Man at the very least, it doesn't seem like it'd be that crazy to then maybe bring the current day Black Panther people into that, or yada yada yada, whatever.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I didn't think it was that good of an idea, but I also don't think it's that bad of one. So right in the middle of the road there. So I feel like I've said it 100 times this episode, but we'll wait and see. Because that Black Panther 2, I believe, is supposed to come out first quarter of like 23.
Yeah, it's a ways out the road.
We're about a year and a half away from that. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll see what happens with What If. We'll see what happens with everything. A final note on episode 6 here is I really hope that there's at least one more episode with Iron Man in it over the course of the season, and that he makes it out alive. He's been in 3 episodes so far and has died in all of them. And that just seems like incredibly bad luck for basically the main character of the MCU for the first 3 phases in the entire Infinity Saga. So
right. He was in 3, so he and T'Challa are tied with 3. I stand corrected from before.
Yeah, T'Challa clearly has had a much better go of it, even though, he got slowly eaten by zombie Wanda in episode 5. He was still alive at the end of it. But for how much longer, who knows? Maybe we'll see the conclusion, maybe we won't. But we'll be back to talk about episodes 7 and 8, and we'll probably have a big episode on the finale by itself as we talk about the, season as a whole. And we still have to do our episodes on Black Widow and Shang-Chi. And we may roll those into one episode together as well, maybe one big one, but we're still trying to figure out our schedule here. We've been a busy time of year.
Treadmill.
and we'll try to get our stuff together, but I guess we'll wait and see about that too. We'll have to rename our podcast to Wait and See. The amount of times I've said it here.
Well, we need a Patreon, and we need some sponsors so we can switch to do this full time, so you guys can start getting episodes weekly/daily. So.
Hey, yeah, if there's any just fabulously wealthy patrons out there that want to, have stumbled upon our podcast and they're like, wow, these guys are amazing. I want to pay them full-time salaries to do this as a career. We are completely open to that. I would quit my job yesterday to do that. Please, fabulously wealthy people listening to us, I beg of thee, hire us to do this full-time because we love talking about this stuff. And it's a bummer when we can't find the time to do it, when
Absolutely.
we want, and we would just love to do it more often. But we will be back in short order for our next couple as 7 and 8 here come out within the next 10 days. We'll be on top of that, and then like I said, finale a week after. So lots of stuff moving here. We're about to hit kind of a big movie season as well. Shang-Chi's already come out, but we have a ton of stuff coming out in October, November, and December. So just a full gauntlet for us to run through and break down and give our thoughts on.
We just got the first trailer for Hawkeye, which I'm sure neither of us has watched, but it is out, so Hawkeye is coming for sure. And the Wheel of Time etches closer and closer and closer, which is not MCU, but I'm more excited than any MCU thing remaining left in the year, except for Spider-Man, obviously.
I was going to say, Spider-Man has got a different level of hype.
Anything else, Wheel of Time is number one. I'm still on book 12. Steve, I was reading yesterday when we were at the beach. Some crazy stuff is going down. So I'm probably going to hop off this call now, do some editing, and then sit down with that book for the rest of the night. So it'll be a good time.
Well, we'll leave it at that, but we'll be back soon with a breakdown of the next couple episodes and more to come in the future as more content comes our way. So we'll see you guys next time.
Deuces.
Peace.
Hey, we're back. Steve, I'm going to start that over. Delete.
Okay, that was fast.